This is Talking Drupal, a bi-weekly chat about web design and development by a group of guys with one thing in common. We love Drupal. We record this live on Wednesday afternoons in a Google Hangout. Visit us at talkingdrupal.com. This is episode 107, Wednesday, November 4th, 2015. Responsive Image Optimization. Welcome, guys.
Hey there.
Could we stick any more keywords into that title today?
Oh, we were trying.
I think we succeeded. So, back to the show today. We have Jason Palmental.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
He's from Fresh Tilled Soil. Welcome, Jason.
Hi there.
It's good to have you back.
Yeah, it's nice to be back on the show.
We had you on episode 100, which was probably about 3 months ago now. And here you are again today. Is this going to be a regular thing or what?
Well, if it's every 3 months, I'm sure I can manage that. Hopefully we can do it a little more often.
All right. Great. Well, welcome back. We also have John Picozzi from Oomph. Welcome, John.
Good afternoon. Looking forward to planning my Drupal 8 release party. Hope everybody else out there is doing the same.
We are. John, you have some audio problems again, so you might need to fix your mic. You've turned into an alien.
Oh, no.
Yep. So check that out while we move on to Nick Laughlin. Hey, Nick.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm actually looking forward to the Drupal 8 release party as well. I was a little surprised when we got the notice November 19th is going to be the release date, and I'm going to have to look into it again. It's been a little while since I've installed it, so a little while, maybe a week or so. But I'm gonna have to install it, really start getting to learn it, and get ready to start talking to clients about it.
Yeah, we actually just started playing around with it for a project at Fresh Tilled Soil. Not actually for a public-facing site, but actually as a prototyping tool.
That's interesting. I mean, that's a great way to get started with it, I would guess. Something that's not necessarily going to production, but a tool you could use internally.
Yeah, well, I think that there's another smaller project that we may use it on. That's a fairly straightforward content site, but I wanted to see how things like field grouping and display suite could be used, and they both have D8 versions that are at least in dev. And so far with this, I've only had to add 3 modules to give this a try, which has been pretty interesting. So I built the same thing in D7, and I had to add about 40.
There's a really cool website called Contrib too that is tracking Drupal contributed modules and their progress in getting a Drupal 8 port. It shows whether there's a port at all, whether work has started, if it started, what version it's at, and whether it's stable. So it's
Nice.
it's pretty cool little website, and it seems to be pretty straightforward to add modules to tracking it, and we'll have a link in the show notes.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I saw that. It was pretty interesting.
So I created a project in our system last week for converting talkingdrupal.com to Drupal 8. So we'll be working on that as we're sort of moving through these projects we have over the next few months. So I'm looking forward to that.
Cool.
So our topic today is responsive images and optimization. We're going to really talking about some techniques Jason used with John recently on a project they're working on together to really get some compressed images and deal with delivering a website targeted for 3G phones, right, or low bandwidth 3G kind of phones.
Yeah.
And talking about some of the techniques they use for that. So, Jason, maybe why don't we start with an overview of what you guys were trying to accomplish
Sure.
by focusing on small images.
Well, so I guess to back up a second and just give a little bit of background, I now work at Fresh Tilled Soil, and we covered that before. But my role there is the director of design and product experience. It's not really supposed to be a technical role. I'm actually supposed to be worrying more about how our designers are doing their work and what kind of work that they're doing and that sort of thing. But part of the focus on this particular project was designing and building a site for the Yakima Valley Farm Workers Clinic, which is a network of clinics in Washington State and Oregon. And we, since we've at Fresh Tilled Soil focused more on strategy and front-end design and prototyping, we partnered with Oomph to do the Drupal development. And so my job on this was basically to be the chief front-end psychologist, basically working on the front end, but trying to make sure that our UX work and our design work was in line with something that's producible in Drupal, was really helping achieve our performance targets set by our development director, Tim Wright, early on in the project, and make sure that we had something that was suitable for an English as second language, primarily mobile audience. So it was an interesting set of challenges. One, for me to not really be responsible for the build, but having to try and work better with John and Kathy over at Oomph. And that was sort of successful to varying degrees. And then really make sure that we kept performance and ease of use at the forefront of everything that we were doing. So really pulling out all the tricks that we could from a front-end perspective and from a Drupal perspective to really deliver on maximum performance on minimal conditions and hardware. So we were testing on older phones and slower connections.
So Jason, as this was a requirement for this project, how did that impact the design of the website from the beginning, if you knew you were targeting mobile and English as a second language?
Well, it was pretty interesting. I mean, I came into it not quite at the very beginning. They started this project before I started at Fresh Tilled Soil back in February. And Steve Hickey, who is the lead strategist and UX designer on this, did a ton of research and testing for the information architecture, the language that was used in all of the labeling for links and navigation, specifying primarily English as second language and also a lower education level, and that combination trying to simulate, even if you had a better education, if you weren't as familiar with the language, you might not, your equivalent fluency might be at a lower grade level. So using things like usability.com, usertesting.com and TreeJack to do some of the testing on the information architecture and then the words that we were using was really important and really helped us increase completion rates for tasks that we were testing. And then the design, we really took a modular pattern-based approach to the design, so that it would be something that was really not relying on large images. There's really only never more than generally one on any given page, and a lot of them don't have any kind of larger image. They're just a number of smaller assets. So from a design perspective, we tried to make sure that we were keeping things lightweight, not overloading things, and really just focusing on the content that people are there to find a doctor and find out where to go. Like, those are the primary things that people needed to do. And the other flip side of that was people looking for work. Healthcare workers, it's a big recruitment tool for them, so we needed to make sure that both those needs were served. They're both served well by well-organized content without a lot of other stuff to get in the way. So it was a good way to look at it.
So our focus today is going to be on the asset side, so images, JavaScript, CSS, optimization. So before we get into that, what was your target for specifically the bandwidth that you were testing at? What kind of devices were you using as your lowest capable device and performance?
So we had a couple of things that we do on every project is in creating a performance budget, we use webpagetest.org in order to get a common baseline on testing competitor websites and the current website for a client, and then use that to set targets for whatever the redesign is going to be. And we do two things. One, we make sure that excuse me, we run a larger number of tests. So we'll run like 9 tests, and we'll set the speed down to, usually it's like 3G fast. So that's sort of a good median benchmark. It makes you a little bit sad when you look at some websites that you've worked on, but you're looking at them all in the same way, so it gives you a more realistic target. And in that area, for that network of sites, they were already over 50% mobile access, and from Steve and our project manager and COO, who are out there to do the research and interviews, their use of their cell phones out there gave us some firsthand knowledge of just how bad it can be. So that's what led us to set the benchmarks there.
And that tool suite is part of the website test.org, right? Being able to throttle and...
Yeah, webpagetest.org.
Webpagetest.org.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And it also incorporates something that Tim Kadlec put together that calculates roughly what it's going to cost someone to view that site in different countries based on average data costs. So it really is a fascinating way to look at stuff. And we've had some projects lately that are in rural areas and in other countries, so it was good to kind of keep that stuff in mind.
Jason, just out of curiosity, how did you come to select that tool?
John, not working. Yeah, so did anyone understand his question?
Yeah, he said
how we came to choose that
tool. Yeah.
So it's definitely one that's gotten a lot of positive press in the web development and design community. It's the one that we found that gives us the information that we want in order to look at total download, number of assets, the start render time, and the document complete time. Those are the main things that we're targeting as our factors for deciding what good performance is. So we want to make sure that we can minimize the time it takes to get the first pixels on the screen, so that people see something happening, and then follow that obviously with a pretty quick complete render so that the content becomes usable.
Did you end up with a target, first pixel time load and full page load and then full page size that you're trying to get to?
We did, and I'm actually I'm just pulling that up so I can tell you a little bit more about it. But roughly, we were looking at trying to get at around 2 seconds to see a start render, and under 7 seconds for a complete page load. So you'd have a fairly complete page load somewhere in between.
And this is on the mobile side, though. I mean,
right. Yeah. So when you look at it on a more typical connection for those of us, in an office setting or on a faster cell phone connection, we were looking at sub 2 seconds for a complete page render. So we had under 700K as a target for total bytes downloaded.
Yep.
And we did hit that. The time fluctuated a little bit. We weren't able to get quite as quick. We hovered between 7 and 8 seconds in most of the tests for a complete page.
And the 700K is uncached load?
Yes, yeah, that's complete load. Subsequent page views, even on 3G, were under 2 seconds.
Yep.
Jason, you may have already said this, but I was just curious as to how
John,
you guys...
we can't understand a thing you're saying.
Oh, are you messing with me?
No, I was just messing with him.
you got me faster than you got him.
Oh,
He's okay now.
I really almost threw my computer at the wall. It's not funny. You may have already said this, and I may have missed it, but how did you come to the benchmarks that you you were trying to achieve as far as, you're testing it, what's reasonable?
We got there by surveying a number of different, there we go, performance budget comparisons. We looked at a number of different sites, and those included Harvard Vanguard, Lexington Medical Center, Mayo Clinic, and a couple others that are in their physical vicinity. And we ran the same tests on all of them, and we made a spreadsheet out of that, and that became the basis for all of our examination of this.
So devil's advocate, if they all had crappy websites that didn't load very fast, you guys, your benchmark would be artificially higher? Is that accurate?
Or we might come to the conclusion that that's ridiculous, and we'd set, basically we wanted to shoot to be 10% at least better than anything else. I think if everything else had not been very good, we probably still would have arrived at fairly similar conclusions. We really are trying to go by the maxim that if you don't have 5% of your, if you don't have your site loading in 5 seconds on a mobile connection, that you're going to lose 75% of your audience. So that was really what we were trying to target, to make sure that people would get what they need to get.
How often did you review these targets and where you were in development? Did you once a week, once a month run the tests and see how you're doing, or did you kind of just wait till the end?
Oh no,
say,
I actually
okay, let's tune it.
I started looking pretty early on. Really, so we did a little bit different process with this than Fresh Tilled Soil is used to doing, in that we didn't do any static HTML comps. I went straight into a theme. I had been hoping to get the chance to rewrite Beep Edition, which is the base theme that I maintain. I did a major rewrite of that and factored in a lot of Tim Wright's code for accessible navigation, and kind of updated a bunch of things to really focus on removing any unnecessary CSS and setting it up so that a child theme based on it would be able to easily unhook the navigation and layout files, so we wouldn't be double loading things. So I tried to figure out how to minimize the things that were being loaded. I actually excluded a couple of core Drupal style sheets just with the template PHP functions, so that we were loading less and less. And then every once in a while, I would start to just go in, because we were building out content structures and working, and the design was in the works, and then I was starting to incorporate it piecemeal. I would go ahead and turn on caching, run the tests, just kind of in my own mind compensate for the fact that I knew we didn't have memcache or APC tuned or anything like that. It was on a dev server. I knew I wasn't going to hit the targets exactly, but based on the numbers that I was seeing, it was pretty close. And I figured that once we were in the final production environment, we'd be right there. And we were, with only a little bit of extra fiddling when we got there.
So let's talk about what you did on the Drupal side here to make this happen.
Sure. So we had a few key modules that we really wanted to focus on that I knew would be kind of a big deal, and so we're focusing in on a few things. We wanted to make sure that we were being as minimal and as performant with JavaScript and CSS loading and placement. We wanted to manage the loading process of web fonts really carefully, and we wanted to do everything we could do to make sure we were handling images in as responsive a way as possible. So,
I have a question about the fonts, because did you include those directly in the theme, or did you use something like Font Your Face or Typekit or something else?
So we started out using fonts.com, and what we found, in order, I mean, I like all of these platforms. I mean, anybody that knows me knows that. So the thing that I like less about Typekit is that there's no fallback for an absence of JavaScript. You just get no web fonts at all. So that's kind of a bummer to me. So we looked at fonts.com. They had the same typefaces that we needed, and we implemented those. And we were using their loading classes to manage the loading process, so we could still have content on the screen and have it be styled, so that we'd know that we'd have a design that held up even during the loading process, even if the web fonts weren't there. But in looking at that sort of performance waterfall graph of load times, I was noticing that the tracking script was taking a really long time. And by a long time, I mean it's just, it was a couple hundred milliseconds, but sometimes it was longer, sometimes it was closer to 3/4 of a second, and that just started to feel like it was an issue. And we had seen this on another project and decided to self-host, and we had much better performance when the tracking script was a little bit more minimal through my fonts. And so we looked into the licensing cost. It was pretty cheap. It was only $60 or $70 to license the web fonts for a one-time cost. So it actually, economically, was better for the client for us to do this. We just got the fonts, we built them into the theme, and my fonts has a much more lightweight tracking script. They all use something to track page views, so you're stuck with that unless you're using an open source typeface. But these typefaces were right in with their brand. It was the right ones for us to be using, and so we just went with the fastest way to serve it, and that was by self-hosting. And then I took it one step further, and rather than using the web font loader as hosted through Google, I actually downloaded the project and incorporated it into the theme, so that we'd have one less external request going back to some other source to make sure that we had the loading classes during the page render process.
So you're implying that your hosting service is faster than Google's?
Well, I'm implying that it's not that it's faster per se in the serving of that request. It's that on the end user's system, their browser then has to do a DNS lookup and go request that asset from Google. So there's a little bit more time rather than having a pipe already open to the server that you're requesting things from. So in general, it means that if you have HTTP Keep Alive set up on the server, which we did, it means that you have this sort of open pipe during the page rendering process, so more assets can come down with fewer overhead on the browser end. So it may not be a lot, but if we shave off half a second, then maybe we're at our target instead of over it. So it all adds up.
Makes sense.
All right, so let's go after these modules that you did first to address images.
Sure. So one of the things that has really interested me lately is responsive images, and the fact that the picture element has been fully approved and starting to be implemented in different browsers. So I wanted to look at if we had any larger images, and we did, not many, but there were a few. What could we do to leverage this new element to serve smaller, more appropriately sized assets to smaller screens? And that we got at that with a combination of modules. One is we used ImageMagick. ImageMagick, the library on the server as well as the module in Drupal, so that instead of gdlib, we're using ImageMagick, which in my experience gives you a little bit better compression and quality of the image when you're making derived image sizes. There's also a submodule in there for ImageMagick Advanced that enables you to use a few more of the functions of ImageMagick instead of just resizing things. And one of those that's really important is the ability to strip metadata. So after you resize the image, the thing to do is strip the metadata out of it, and that can often reduce, like drastically reduce the file size. I mean, depending on the image, it could be 30 or 40% smaller. So it can be pretty significant.
How resource intensive is ImageMagick versus GD Library?
You'd never know.
Okay.
You would never be able to tell. I mean, it's been around for probably 20 years. I mean, I remember building it into a website for the 2003 America's Cup, using it as a batch script on a Windows server, and using it to convert 10 megabyte CMYK images over to RGB and smaller derived web images. I mean, it's kind of amazing.
Is it actively
really
maintained, Jason?
Oh yeah.
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 All right.
Yep.
Jason, how easy is it to configure once you've basically installed ImageMagick on your server, because there's a server component there? Once you have that there, how easy is it to configure?
There's actually virtually no configuration to do. Once you run the installation, and there's packages available for almost every flavor of Linux that it would be on, or there's a Windows executable and all kinds of things. So, and it also exists for the Mac. So it's easy to install there, and then you just install the module in Drupal, and then you go under Image Toolkit, and it will be there as an option next to GDlib. And so you just say, I want to use ImageMagick. Most of the time, through the installation process, the path to the executable has been added to your path, so you don't really have to find the absolute path of where that binary lives. And so it really just says, there's a keyword in there, it just should be convert is the name of it. And then you can set the percentage compression, just like you do with GDlib. And there are a couple of other options, but that's basically it. There really isn't anything else that you have to do to configure things.
It's 25 years old, 1990.
I mean, it's kind of amazing the sorts of things you can do. You can sharpen images, you can blur images, and we actually use a bunch of those techniques. You can also obviously desaturate and make something black and white.
So Jason,
cool.
For someone who's just installs Drupal today and is using whatever is there, what is different about this step? It's installing something on the server, and then installing this module.
Yep, and what you end up with here immediately is slightly smaller file size with better quality images.
Mm-hmm. And
then the ImageMagick Advanced module enables you to do things like strip metadata, which will further reduce your file size.
Is there any reason why you wouldn't want to strip metadata?
Well, if it's a photography site and you want that stuff to go with it, otherwise, I don't think there's any reason. And any image optimization service is generally going to do that.
It's where they're getting one of their bigger bangs for the buck, yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, there's two things that you can do with a JPEG to optimize it. One is to strip metadata, and the other is to reorganize actually the order of the bytes in the file. Mm-hmm. And Smush It or Image Optim or some of these other utilities, like that's generally the approach that they take. And that actually brings up the next module that's worth talking about.
So before we go on to that, you would say that, did you say 30 to 40% decrease in image size?
It can be.
Okay. Depends on what you did with the image first before you even put it there, right?
Right.
Okay.
But it's significant. I mean, even if it's 10%, I mean that's still significant. But you'll get a pretty big bang for your buck there. The next thing that we added was Image API Optimize, which for people who have been around images in the web and performance, a lot of people have used the Smush It service from Yahoo for a long time. They actually recently shut that down a few months back, and the Image API Optimize module was designed to use that service, or that was one option, so that when you create image sizes, image styles in Drupal, and you have this enabled, once you save the image, it pipes it through that service to further compress your derived images that you've made in Drupal. And it's totally transparent, and it's really fast. You'd never even know that it's happening. The server just posts it over to the service and brings it back in an optimized form. That got shut down. Somebody else created the Resmush-It service, and there's a patch to the Image API Optimize module that enables that service. So then what you do is, again, under Image Toolkit, if you have this installed, along with ImageMagick and GDlib, you have Image API Optimize as an option. You select that, and then the secondary selection is to use ImageMagick. So that combination pipes that image through, it does the resize and whatever you decide to do in your image style, then you're stripping the metadata, then it is going to seamlessly pass that image through the Resmush-It service and save on the server the most compressed version of that file. And if you look at the Yakima homepage, yvfwc.com, it's a full-width, 1600 pixel wide image that looks really, really, really nice, and it's 64K.
Wow. Okay.
And it's kind of astonishing. Like, I don't really know how or why that image is so small, but I'm pretty psyched that it is.
Jason, you mentioned the Image API Optimize, and you wrote with patch. I just want to let people know that in our show notes we actually have a link to the patch, well, what the patch number is. And what was the patch for? Do you know?
That was to add the Resmush-It service into
Okay.
the Image API Optimize service, because the Smush-It service is now gone.
And Resmush-It is free.
Yep. And so far, John was just asking about the reliability of the service. I haven't seen any issues with it. I know we had one question, I think, with the folks at Yakima in their maintenance of the site. Were getting a couple of odd error messages, but they went away when their network connections improved. So I don't know that it was really at all an issue with the Resmush-It service.
And this service, the Resmush-It, is called when the image is rendered the first time?
It's called
like an image style?
Well, it's like it's part of the image. It's like it's part of it. So Drupal makes the resized image using whatever technique has been requested, and then after it does that, it tries to pipe it through this service. And the nice thing is, if the service fails, you still get the derived image saved on the server. You just don't get it compressed more. It will generate an error message, but if you're not reporting those out to the screen, which you shouldn't be on a production site, then it's just an error that gets logged. It's not something that's going to break the experience.
I guess, Jason, I was trying to get to the point of it's not every time the image is rendered to a user, right? It's when the image size is created the first time.
Exactly, yes.
Okay. Yeah.
And if it fails, does it do it again next cron or next visit, or does it just never try again?
Yeah, that's a good question. But I mean,
I would imagine it tries it again.
All cached images are, all derived images are refreshed periodically by Drupal anyway. Yep. So it would happen the next time. So whenever that cached version expires.
Right. Okay, so that's kind of the pool of resources to optimize the image, right?
Yep.
Then you used a few other tools. The next one was Image Field Focus, which we did talk about before on the show, I believe.
Yeah, we did, and actually, I think that it was early on. It was around the time when we covered it on the show initially, I think. I had heard from, I don't know if it was Jeff Eaton or somebody else, just about a combination of ways to use image styles and image field focus to get at responsive images that are sort of more art directed. And the ability to say, like, on a large screen, it's this really wide image, and on a smaller screen, you might have a different scale and crop that you want to show a narrower and taller version, so it's better on a phone. And You can achieve that with image styles, but you need to know how to load the right image style for the right screen. And that's where using picture fill or the picture module comes into play. But you need to define what you don't want to lose in the image, and that's what image field focus allows. So what image field focus does is when you define an image upload field, you can enable image field focus on it. And what that does is it shows you the image after you've uploaded it, and then underneath it, it shows a sort of slightly grayed out version of the image, and you can click and drag to draw a selection box on top of the image. And the idea is you draw that box around the stuff that you never want to get cropped. So it's like an anti-crop tool. So basically what you're saying is, you know, if I'm looking at the screen now and I screenshot Steve coughing, and it's like, I want to resize this image and I never want to lose Steve coughing. So I would draw a box around Steve's head, and on the large version, it would show the whole scene that we have here right in front of us, or on the smaller screen, it might be cropped down to just showing Steve's head. And so that's what image field focus does, is allows the site owner who's uploading the photo to determine what is the important area of this photo, so that when we use it on a smaller scale, we don't lose the important bits. So that
it's a great tool. I mean, so you could have a bunch of different image styles that create things that are squares, rectangles, large and small, and it keeps the primary focus of the image on all of those croppings.
Exactly. And so that, in addition to creating that cropping box, it also adds preset styles that you can add into your image styles, so that some actions that you can say, I would like to do not just a regular scale and crop, I want to do an image field focus scale and crop. So what we did for the larger big hero images on the site was we created a smaller preset that was like the banner image small, that had an image field focus scale and crop that had a much narrower and taller aspect ratio. And now we have presets that can deliver the smaller size and the larger size, and you can have as many steps in between as you want. And the picture element in HTML allows you to define, using media queries, which one is the primary. Mm-hmm. And so just using approved HTML in Chrome, you actually wouldn't need any other polyfills or anything to make this work. But in Drupal, you do need a way to output this markup so that you get a picture element with source set entries inside and a fallback image tag at the bottom. And you need to have the media queries in there. I skipped over trying to test out the picture module, which would have probably made our lives easier, and ended up sort of rolling my own, adding the picture fill JavaScript library to the theme, and then I created some view code that we could use in different displays that would pull these things out and layer them in the order that we wanted to present it. And anytime we were using that code for banner images across the site, we just used the same thing. So it's built right into the views to actually generate the markup that we want.
Any questions, guys, about those basic ingredients so far?
No, I do plan on implementing some of this over the next couple of weeks on a couple of sites, though. So
yeah,
I'll report back.
I would definitely, like, along with John's recommendation, I would check out the picture module. The one thing that I was wondering about, and the reason I didn't dig into the picture module at the time, was I wasn't convinced it was going to work with image field focus, but I don't really see why it wouldn't, because they're not really connected.
Right, yeah.
So there shouldn't be any issue, because it's, as long as you can select which preset you want to be tied to which breakpoint, then it should be no issue.
Right. All right, let's move on to talking about some of the aggregation that you did.
Sure. So there are a couple of different ways that you can sort of optimize your CSS and JavaScript, and like one of the simple ones is to just use the boost module or fiddle around with your htaccess file and make sure that it's bundling and gzipping things. There are a few other things out there to more aggressively minify CSS. We start in the development environment by using some build tools. We were using Grunt on this project, and Grunt, Sass, we used Grunticon to actually generate SVG icons with PNG fallbacks. So we actually didn't use an icon font on this at all. And so in the theme, the generated CSS was already pretty aggressively minified. But we wanted to have ways to make sure that our whole page load was as optimized as possible. So we looked at the advanced aggregation module, and that's the one that seemed to give us the most control.
So it's not about just compressing things; it's about where they're loaded in the HTML page.
Yeah. So one of the things that is a total performance killer, or at least it's a perceived performance killer, is like blocking the render of the page. And there are two things that are going to always block the rendering of your page, and one of those is CSS, and the other one is JavaScript. And we tend to load a lot of that. So what I wanted to make sure we did was optimize where we put those things. So by default, in Drupal, in most themes, all of your CSS and JavaScript is in the head of the HTML of the page, in that section. But in truth, an awful lot of it doesn't really need to be there. You need to have the styles there so that your page will load with the design, but you don't really need to have most of the JavaScript there. It's actually usually not a big deal at all to have almost all of the JavaScript down at the bottom of the page. So actually have it loaded in the basically down right before your closing HTML tag and body tag. You don't want to do it with everything, though. And so that's why you have to be a little bit selective. So if you're trying to target older browsers, you need to put respond.js in the head of the page. You want that to load as quickly as possible. You also want to fire off any requests for web fonts as quickly as possible. And in general, you want to call in whatever JavaScript framework you're using, so like jQuery. You want that all in the head because you need to have those things there before you start to try and do anything else with them later on. And so the thing that you can do to make sure that they're not blocking is to load them asynchronously. Now that's the one thing that I don't love about advanced aggregation is it gives you an option to set JavaScript to be deferred, which helps your page render a little bit, but not as much as saying async equals true, which you can do if you're adding JavaScript using Drupal add.js in the template.php file. So we add some things there, and we set the asynchronous flag to be true. So that way, essentially what happens is the browser fires off the request for it, and then it says, okay, I'm going to go about my business, and then it moves on with loading the rest of the page and rendering it, and then things fire when it loads. So most things it's okay to do that as long as you don't run into the issue of I haven't loaded jQuery yet and now I'm loading this next script and I need it to be able to fire, but it can't until jQuery is there, and you could end up with some errors.
So Jason, advanced aggregation module is a module that helps you configure this. Does it give you any advice on any of these things or any warnings, or is this a trial and error process?
Yes to both, really. It does have a lot of helpful tips. It does give you little hints as you go through all the different configuration options in there, and there's like 4 different screens to look at. It will generally say, usually okay to turn all these things on. These are the kinds of things that will happen if it's going wrong. And then there are other features where it'll say, this is pretty experimental, only do this if you know what you're doing. And so it's as John's pointing out, when it breaks pretty hard.
Yeah, it's fairly obvious when you save it if it's not working.
Yeah.
I think the only times you have to be careful are with certain libraries if they're only used in certain pages. Like we had an issue recently where we have a streaming service, and the JavaScript only loads in those pages. So you have to make sure that you test. It's not just visit the home page, and if the site works, it works. Yeah. You have to test a couple different pieces of functionality. But if it's not going to work, it's not going to work.
Yeah, and one of the things that is, Drupal is pretty good about packaging up different aggregations of JavaScript to handle things like that when Drupal knows about it. So that's why it's important to make sure that you are always adding your JavaScript through the theme in the right way and not just dropping it into a template file like I was. Kathy and John forced me to be better about that, and it really does pay dividends so that Drupal will know what that JavaScript is and what those functions are, and it'll make sure that they're present if they're being called in the page.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the nifty things that you can do with advanced aggregation is also try and target the number of bundles. Drupal usually will, when you turn on aggregation, it will try and combine things into as few number of file bundles as possible. You can tune that a little bit with advanced aggregation, and then you have some options. So if you say it's okay to have 10 CSS and JavaScript file bundles, then it can package them up into smaller chunks and be more modular. So you might have slightly less load from one page to the other, but it reduces it kind of reduces the reuse of some of them, and it does mean you have more HTTP requests. So it is kind of a trade-off. I set them, I think, to 5 each, and that seemed to be working just fine. Because IE still has a limit. I think even with IE 11, I think there's still a limit of like 32 requests or something like that. So if you don't have then things well bundled, you end up with a pretty broken-looking site.
Had that problem.
So, what? So these strategies that we've kind of just gone through, we've got the image. We've talked about techniques for minimizing image style, ways to improve the responsive images, the way they're created, using basically the picture element for HTML5 for longevity of your site and for responsive images. And we just talked about some aggregation of your JavaScript files. Jason, sound like you were going to say something there.
Well, yeah, there's one thing that I sort of alluded to but didn't get to, which is you can select where you want JavaScript to load, and you can also select how you want it to reorganize the load order, which is kind of interesting. So you can try out some of these things. I didn't use all of these settings because we didn't have enough time to really test it in a production environment. So we were just a little bit more conservative. But we did push most of the JavaScript to the footer, except for frameworks. And we did a little bit of optimization in load order. And then you can do more. You can actually specify that we set all the JavaScript to deferred also. So that way we got a few more things out of the way of the load process.
So I was getting to the point that it sounds like someone could implement most of these things on an existing website and get the benefits of them without coding anything almost. Unless there's some issues if you're going to use maybe a picture module and taking a look at what the code the views are generating with the picture element. But if you just went after the image size with image magic and image API optimize and some of this aggregation stuff, with just installs and some testing, you could probably gain a lot of benefits.
You absolutely could. Those things don't. So the only thing you'd have to do with any of those is build a couple of those steps into your image styles, but that would just be appending your existing image styles.
Right.
And that's kind of it. So you really can get a lot of performance benefits without recoding anything. And then with the picture module, what you'd be doing is specifying a different image element. So you'd go into your view, and you have currently a field that you're pulling out. Let's say it's a view of field. So you have an image field that you're pulling in. Instead, you'd be, I'm surmising here, you'd be pulling in a picture image field, which would then allow you to make sure you're mapping the image styles that you want, that sort of thing. I haven't gone through the configuration of it yet, so I'm guessing a little bit. But
So an interesting strategy for someone would be to take the website that they're interested in optimizing, taking it, going over to webpagetest.org, taking a look at what the page load size is, how long it's taking to download, do some testing there, and then make some of these changes and see what the results are.
Yeah, and I think that you'd be amazed at what kind of savings you can achieve with that. I do want to say, though, that it does start with the theme. The whole reason that I start with Beep Edition most of the time is because I know I've already removed as much of the HTML as possible. And in building views, we get pretty aggressive with using display suite extras to strip out extra layers of divs and use the semantic views module to strip out more layers of divs and views. So, I would say we're probably generating only 50 to 60% of the HTML that you would normally get out of Drupal. So it does pay pretty big dividends to get just to reduce the overall amount of markup that's getting delivered, just by getting better about that front end configuration and the modules that you choose there.
Sure. I mean, that's a technique we've used for a while, is taking that same strategy. But for someone who's just looking to get some quick benefits.
Yep.
Sorry, my phone's ringing. Let me shut that off. Someone looking to get some quick benefits, some of these quick things with the images could be helpful. And it depends on the website. Yeah.
Well, it does, but I think so the first step is just getting a benchmark and see where you are now. We were able to get a pretty robust page down to 700K,
right.
and that was a huge savings. And if you're able to take your current page size and reduce it by 10 or 15% just by installing a couple of these modules and reconfiguring some image styles, it might even be a bigger savings than that. And then by tuning the loading process with advanced aggregation, you might not be reducing the overall load time, but you might be reducing the amount of time it takes to render the page so that there's a usable page even before all of the content and styles have sort of fully loaded in.
Okay, so any other tips, tricks, any other things in this area that we just want to mention before we wrap this up? Anyone?
I think it's really worth it to check out some other podcasts on responsive design. I got every week when I listen to the Responsive Web Design podcast, they have different people on, and so like they had the designers of Radio Free Europe on, talking about like what the implications are for performance on their site, and just talking about strategies, and it was really, really eye-opening.
And John's recommending a really good one too, looking into some server-side caching stuff.
Totally.
That's
yes.
Memcache and APC. Although there's a new module out there, Memcache takes a little bit more work to get put together. There's a new module that I've been looking at that apparently sets up MySQL to be almost as fast as Memcache. I don't recall off the top of my head the name of it, but it'll be in the show notes. But looking at server-side caching and setting that kind of stuff up can really help with performance as well, and helping your images get served faster.
Yeah, well, and that's also it is really something worth noting because that is again something that you can do without changing much of really anything on
yeah.
the front end. But if you set up APC, it optimizes and pre-compiles or saves the compiled PHP file, so your admin pages will be faster as well as the other ones on the site. And memcache is a replacement essentially for hitting the database for all of the cache tables, or well, all but 2 or 3. So that's a pretty huge savings that doesn't touch the front end, but can have a dramatic impact on page load times. I mean, I think that when we got that configured, that was easily a second or two of page load time that disappeared.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit more set up, kind of like Image Magic. You have to do some stuff on the server. You have to make some modifications to the settings of PHP file, but it's, the savings are real.
Yeah, I mean, but I was able to figure it out. So, I think it's not that hard.
Yeah, no, not difficult, but if you're not used to doing server-side things,
sometimes. Yeah. There's, I think there are really good directions, and these are the kinds of things that once you figure them out, using ImageMagick, using Memcache, using APC, those are just kind of some foundational things for higher performance Drupal sites, or really any website that you're going to run. And Drupal does have pretty good modules for that. I would not recommend APC as a general purpose caching module, though. I know supposedly you can use it that way in Drupal. I have not seen any good come of that. Really, just using it on the.
Well, you just don't want to use it as a content cache. You want to use it just for the opcode caching, and it's
right.
Cache, yeah.
And if you have PHP 5.5 or higher, I believe, you don't even need APC. It's kind of built into PHP.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually in Drupal 8. It's required. You need to have at least PHP 5.5 and opcache enabled in order for it to install happily.
Actually, it lets you install without opcache. I did it the other day, but you have to say explicitly, I want to continue installing without it.
Got it. It was a setting in MAMP, so I just turned it on.
Yeah, right. All right, let's move on to our module of the week. I think John entered this in here. John, are you still Cyborg or what?
I don't know. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay. Well, I'm using my my camera's microphone. So
good.
The module of the week is commerce message. So if you're running an e-commerce store using Drupal Commerce, you may notice that there isn't really an easy way to keep track of order messages. The revisions log does a pretty good job of keeping track of changes to the order and logging some messages, but those are really for revision purposes, not so much for store administrative purposes. The module of the week here is Commerce Message, which allows you to basically add messages to orders and review those messages to kind of keep a running history of the order. So a great example of this would be...
And John, they're attached to the order when you look at the order, right?
Correct, yep. So
right.
What this does is you can actually use Commerce back office as well, and it'll kind of reconfigure your order screen to show you all these messages as you're viewing the order. Great example of this would be something to the effect of order goes out, credit card gets declined. You call the customer up and you get their credit card reprocessed. You can put a note on the account, talk to customer, credit card reprocessed. You could also put a comment on there when an order ships with the tracking number. And you have the option here also to have those messages go out via email to the customer. So you have a lot of really good flexibility, and it adds a feature into Commerce, or at least into orders, that's not currently there out of the box.
Sounds useful. I'll have to keep it in mind for the future.
All right, very good. All right, So I think we've come to the end of 107. Jason, thank you for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
Great to have you back. You did a talk like this at Drupal PVD a few weeks back, and it was well received there. So having you come on the show today was great. Great benefit for people. You know, some of these great tips just to make your site perform better, and they're easy to do, and they don't take a lot of work is fantastic.
Yeah. Well, it's I think they're really good tips. They have a long life. I mean, you can use them in a lot of different scenarios, and I really do appreciate, you know, the comments that we've had over time, you know, where people have tried something out from listening to the show and it's helped their project. So that's awesome. Along those lines, I have to publicly acknowledge that I completely dropped the ball in writing back to Bo Shipley, who was listening to us talk about using MailChimp, and he asked me if I could help him out on this a little while back, and I never got back to him. So, Bo, if you're listening, I'm sorry. I'm going to email you as soon as we're done with this show, and I hope that I'll be able to help you out at some point. He's from Chattanooga in Tennessee.
Okay, sorry, Bo.
I had to acknowledge that while I was on the show.
All right, great. So, Jason, where can people connect with you outside of listening to you here once every 3 months?
You can find me at jpomentel. You pretty much any social network. You can find me working at Fresh Tilled Soil up in Watertown, Massachusetts, all the time, and you will be able to find me in person at the Drupal 8 release party at Drupal PVD on November 19th.
Fantastic. How about you, John?
You will also be able to find me at the Drupal 8 release party wearing my Drupal 8 party hat. You can find me on all the major social networks at John Picozzi, and you can find me always on at the newly designed in Drupal 8, johnpicozzi.com or oomfink.com.
johnpicozzi.com is in Drupal 8?
It is in Drupal 8.
Cool.
Awesome.
We'll have to check it out.
I was a little bit bummed. I went to install the Twitter module, and it has a dependency on the Entity API, and then the Entity API isn't quite ready for prime time yet. So had to pull some code off the shelf to get that to work. But it's a work in progress.
Just good. I think I just was disconnected. Are you guys still there?
Nope, we're still here.
Okay.
We got you.
Oh, I was frozen. So I don't know if there was any dead space there, but how about you, Nick?
You can find me online at NickSpan pretty much everywhere. And I will also be at the Drupal 8 release party. I'm pretty excited about it. It's going to be a good time. Maybe we'll install Drupal as, you know, part of the celebration. Maybe we'll just have some pizza. But looking forward to it.
Just signed up for a lightning talk.
Yeah, I'll do another demonstration. The live demo last time didn't go too poorly, so it's always fun.
Great, John. I'm just checking out johnpicozzi.com. Just keep those blog posts coming, John. They're very impressive.
Blog posts?
Yeah. Well, your website just has your signature on it. It looks like, right?
There should be a Twitter feed there.
Oh no, there's a Twitter feed too. That's true. Okay, there we go.
Oh, I see. You're making fun.
Yes, of course.
I'm not really sure why I'm not getting any credit for digitizing the artwork.
That's in version 2.0.
Yeah, okay.
All right, guys. So I'm Stephen Cross.
Permanent beta.
I'm Stephen Cross. You can find me at Stephen Cross on Twitter or parallaxinfotech.com on my company website. And I think that's it, guys. That's a wrap, we call it, huh?
All right.
See you.
Thanks, guys.